He placed it from the rear, read it: cheating tales, a genuine infidelity narrative. Welcome to Tales of Infidelity. If you're just joining us, we'd love for you to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. In just a fleeting moment, we find the inspiration to weave even more tales. Kindly show your appreciation for this video. Now let us begin the tale. I never imagined I would become someone who would step over a boundary. Yet, there are moments when life guides you down paths you never anticipated. My name is Sarah. I've been married to my husband, Daniel, for a decade. We crafted a life together, exchanged dreams, and vowed to always stand by one another. Yet, at some point, everything shifted. I transformed. Or perhaps we both did. Daniel and I crossed paths during our college years. He possessed a gentle kindness, a sense of responsibility, and a quiet strength that enveloped me in a feeling of safety. Our love story unfolded quietly, lacking the fervent intensity or grand displays often found in tales of romance. It was unwavering, akin to the bedrock of a home designed for permanence. We tied the knot at a young age, convinced that our love and dedication would see us through any challenges that came our way. For an extended period, they existed in that state. The initial years of our union brimmed with affection and joy. We journeyed, built a life side by side, and nurtured one another's aspirations. Yet, as time passed, the small moments that once drew us nearer began to diminish. Daniel consistently put in great effort, striving to create a secure future for us. I grasped the reason. He aimed to support us, ensuring that we would never face hardship. However, in the process, he began to distance himself from me. Our discussions turned brief and to the point. Have you settled the electricity bill yet? What time is your meeting scheduled for tomorrow? It's time for us to gather some groceries. We continued to care for one another, yet the closeness we once shared began to diminish. I reassured myself that it was just a part of life. This is the reality of long-term relationships. The fervor may fade, yet affection work. And initially, he was merely that, someone I worked with on projects, exchanged emails with, and occasionally shared a coffee with. He possessed a delightful sense of humor, an undeniable charm, and an extraordinary ability to make others feel acknowledged. Aaron was present, in stark contrast to Daniel, who was perpetually consumed by his responsibilities. He paid attention. He observed details. It began with brief exchanges. Innocuous, I reassured myself. I'd bring up a book I was reading, and he'd genuinely inquire about it later. He would pick up on my stress and extend a comforting word. It wasn't anything out of line, just the sort of attention that makes you feel appreciated. I had no idea how deeply I had been yearning for that. One day, we found ourselves collaborating on a significant project. It involved late nights, creative discussions, and extensive hours spent together. Initially, I maintained a distinct boundary in my thoughts. I was in a marriage and I cherished my partner. However, as I spent more time with Aaron, I came to understand just how isolated I had truly felt. He brought out a laughter in me that I hadn't experienced in years. He made me feel intriguing, as if I were more than merely a wife who handled schedules and responsibilities. And then there was a moment, a simple, seemingly insignificant moment that transformed everything. We were toiling away into the night, and I felt utterly drained. I released a heavy sigh, massaging my temples, and he extended his hand, briefly making contact with mine. "You put in so much effort," he remarked gently, a warm smile gracing his lips. It was a seemingly insignificant moment, yet it resonated deeply within me, marking the first genuine connection I had felt in ages. I reassured myself that it was merely a casual act of kindness. Yet that evening, as I rested in bed next to Daniel, my mind was consumed by it. Not due to the contact itself, but rather because of the significance it held. I found myself lacking something in my marriage, and for the first time, I was ready to acknowledge it. The weeks went by, and my bond with Aaron grew stronger. I convinced myself it was merely friendship. Ultimately, we never ventured beyond any tangible limits. However, on an emotional level. Emotionally, I found myself in a place I knew I shouldn't be. I eagerly anticipated my tasks ahead. In a manner I had not experienced previously. I found myself staying in our talks, chuckling just a bit longer, revealing a touch more than I intended. One evening, Daniel and I sat at the dinner table in quiet contemplation. He was perusing his phone, hardly acknowledging my presence. I came to understand how effortlessly we had drifted apart. How did we end up as strangers? I wished to speak with him. To express that I was feeling adrift, that I required additional effort from him. However, I did not. Instead, the following morning, I found myself anticipating Aaron's smile at work. I can't pinpoint the moment it evolved into something deeper. Perhaps it was the conversations that stretched into the early hours, or extraordinary. Perhaps it was when I began to put more thought into my morning attire, wishing he would take notice. Perhaps it was the manner in which he ignited a sense of vitality within me. A sensation I hadn't experienced in years. One day, I found myself in an unexpected place, questioning everything I had ever believed about love, marriage, and loyalty. And the most terrifying aspect. I found myself uncertain about whether I wanted to cease. I wish I could claim that I saw the peril coming from a distance and chose to turn back before the moment slipped away. However, the reality is that emotions don't function in that manner. One does not simply awaken one day and choose to allow their heart to wander. One small step leads to another, and before you realize it, you find yourself in a place you never thought you would be. Aaron entered my daily life in a manner I never expected. It lacked any grand gestures or clear signs, at least initially. It was in the subtle details, the way we shared knowing glances across the conference room, the way his voice softened when he inquired about my day. The way I caught myself checking my phone, just to see if he had reached out. I convinced myself it was innocuous. Ultimately, I wasn't engaging in any wrongdoing. I continued to return to Daniel each night, to sleep beside him, to wear the ring that represented our promises. Yet, deep down, I realized I had already started to distance myself from him. One evening, as Daniel and I sat in the living room, I observed the stillness that had enveloped us. He was engrossed in the news, captivated by the latest financial updates. While I sat nearby with a book in hand, my lap feigning interest in the pages. I longed to speak with him, to extend my hand, to express how deeply I missed him. Yet each time I attempted to articulate my feelings, the words became lodged in my throat. I found myself pondering whether he sensed the widening gap between us. If he longed for me as deeply as I longed for him. Yet he remained silent. I managed to persuade myself that my actions were not truly misguided. Yet the reality was that I had crafted an entirely different realm for myself, a place where Aaron was the individual I eagerly anticipated encountering each day, a space where I felt recognized, valued, and truly seen. Then, one evening, everything transformed. We had been toiling away into the night on a project, just the two of us in the office. The air conditioning hummed gently while outside the city lights danced against the windows. We were sharing a laugh over something, one of those light-hearted inside jokes that had formed between us. And for a fleeting instant, all else slipped from my mind. Then, he gazed at me, truly gazed at me, and the atmosphere surrounding us transformed. "Sarah," he said gently, "may I ask you something?" I paused. "Absolutely. Are you content?" The question struck me more profoundly than I anticipated. I attempted to respond, yet the words eluded me. The truth was intricate. I cherished Daniel. I had constructed a life alongside him. Yet, joy, I found myself questioning the last time I experienced genuine happiness. Aaron didn't push me for a response. He simply observed me. His expression a mystery. For a fleeting instant, I sensed that I was teetering on the brink of something perilous. I should go, I murmured, rising to my feet with a sudden urgency. He did not hinder my progress. He didn't extend his hand, or attempt to draw me back. As I turned to leave, a tightness gripped my chest. That night, as I lay in bed beside Daniel, I sensed the burden of it all bearing down on me. A decision lay before me. How do you decide between the life you've created and the emotions that demand your attention? I wish I could claim that I recognized the right choice immediately, that I paused, understood the direction I was taking, and halted myself before it became irreversible. Yet, feelings often defy reason, and at times, the most challenging choice is the one that aligns with what is right. So rather than retreating, I allowed myself to descend a bit deeper. I began discovering excuses to linger at the office longer. Reasons for contacting Aaron outside of work hours. The messages appeared harmless, at least initially. A light-hearted quip regarding a meeting, a suggestion for an engaging read, and a warm wish for your day to be going smoothly. Yet, it was never solely about the words. It was the emotion that accompanied them, the thrill of witnessing his name appear on my screen, the way my heart quickened as I entered the office, fully aware that he would be present. One evening, Daniel posed a question that caused my heart to freeze. "You have been..." He mentioned, his voice soft yet resolute, that he had been distracted lately. "Is everything all right?" I stood still. This was the moment I could have revealed the truth to him. It wasn't focused on Aaron, but rather on my own emotions, the longing I felt, and the desire for deeper connection in our marriage. However, I managed to put on a smile and replied, "I'm simply overwhelmed with work." He nodded, embracing my response without hesitation. In that instant, a profound realization washed over me, shattering my heart. Daniel had complete faith in me, and I was violating that faith. That night, I lay awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, consumed by a deep sense of remorse. What was I up to? Was I truly prepared to jeopardize everything I had created with Daniel for something that could potentially be an illusion? Aaron ignited a spark within me. Yet it was Daniel who had been my steadfast companion through the years. The man who embraced me in my tears, who rejoiced in my triumphs, who vowed to love me through the toughest times. I understood the course of action I needed to take. The following morning, I entered the workplace with a resolution firmly in place. I intended to create some space between Aaron and myself. I would concentrate on my relationship, on restoring what had been lost. Yet, when I caught sight of him, leaning against the coffee machine with that effortless smile, my determination faltered. Because the truth, the complicated, heart-wrenching truth, was that I wasn't certain if I was ready to say goodbye to him. And that filled me with a deeper fear than anything else. The heaviness of my decisions bore down on me, an intolerable load I could scarcely endure. I had devoted weeks, even months, teetering on the brink of a boundary I was well aware I ought to avoid. I convinced myself that I was still in command, that I hadn't crossed any lines, but deep inside, I understood that wasn't the reality. The emotional chasm I had forged with Daniel was undeniable. The bond one had forged with Aaron was unmistakable. Now, as I find myself at a pivotal moment in my marriage, a decision looms before me. The type of individual I aspired to become. That morning, I compelled myself to confront what I had been evading for far too long. I gazed at my husband, truly gazed at him. He sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand. His gaze drifting over the news on his phone, as he did each morning. The recognition of it caused a tightness in my chest. This was the person with whom I had constructed a life. The individual who had stood by my side through it all. And yet, I found myself drifting further from him. I inhaled deeply. "Is that you, Daniel?" He looked up, taken aback. "Indeed." I paused. The thoughts I wished to express seemed overwhelming, almost burdensome. Yet, I realized I could no longer maintain the facade. I long for our connection. I spoke gently. A shift occurred in his expression. He set his phone aside and regarded me intently for a prolonged moment. Could you clarify what you mean? I gulped. It seems as though we've been growing distant, as if our conversations have lost the depth they once had. I hope we can avoid becoming strangers. He let out a breath, massaging the nape of his neck. It seems I've been so absorbed in my work that I failed to notice how far apart everything has become. His gaze sought out mine. Are you feeling discontent? The sincerity in his voice nearly shattered me. I love you, I said, my voice just a soft murmur. However, I sense that there's something I've been lacking. Rather than discussing it with you, I found myself searching for it elsewhere. His face turned ashen. What do you mean? Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I've found myself deeply engaged with someone at work. Nothing occurred on a physical level, yet I allowed myself to become too emotionally invested in someone else. The ensuing silence was suffocating. Daniel gazed at me, and I could perceive the anguish reflected in his eyes. It was the sort of hurt I never wished to inflict upon him. And yet I had. What makes you bring this up at this moment? He finally inquired. His voice strained. Because I can't bear the thought of losing you, I said, my heart racing. Because I came to understand that whatever I believed I was lacking, it was never about Aaron. It centered around us. I truly wish to preserve what we share. He averted his gaze, his jaw tight with tension. I find myself at a loss for words. I don't anticipate you having an answer immediately, I confessed. However, I want you to understand that I am selecting you, that I desire to mend this. Daniel remained silent for an extended period. He rose to his feet, running a hand through his hair. I require some time, he finally stated, to process this, to understand what it signifies for us. I acknowledged it, understanding the need for respect in that moment. I comprehend. On that particular day at the office, I came to a resolution. I had to bring closure to my relationship with Aaron. Not merely the talks or the unspoken looks, but the deep emotional grip he had on my heart. Upon encountering him in the hallway, he wore that familiar smile he always had. However, I chose not to return it. Could we have a conversation? I inquired. Certainly, he replied, his smile diminishing as he detected the gravity in my tone. A serene nook in the office caught our attention, and I inhaled deeply. Aaron, I need to take a step back. His brows knitted together. Sarah, what's happening?